Can you hear me? Is it on yet? Good. So welcome again to Cambridge Tech Week. I did want to pause for a moment just on how we might have got here, why we might be gathering, my own thoughts. My human caffeine experience, as you put it, has shown, unsurprisingly, there's a huge passion for technology and innovation gathered here in this room. And as somebody put it to me, it's about time we had a London Tech Week in Cambridge. And I agree. So there is something about this place. Harriet said, we're interested in building increasingly international communities, but there is something interesting and special about this corner of this country in kind of science and technology history terms. So there's layers and layers of history put down over the centuries. I've found innovation stretching back to the time of bubonic plague, looking for it, and there's obviously the original university here predating Isaac Newton by 4 or 5 centuries. But in recent times, those layers of history have been put down ever more quickly. My company, Cambridge Consultants, was founded in 1960 with the view to putting the brains of academia at the disposal of British industry. And that might not seem a particularly strange thing to do today, but at its time it was an unusual thought because, of course, in academia the phrase "a life's work" was quite common, and there was perhaps not enough concern about commercial exploitation, and British industry, by contrast, was iterating at best and not making breakthroughs. And that idea of a strong link between industry and academia is so much more sophisticated and diverse today, but it does form, I still think, a kind of a strong element in what is now known as the Cambridge Hub. This has been rated variously as one of the top-ranking science hubs in the world. Particular reference I was looking at put it as third, amazingly, behind the Bay Area and Boston. And that was because of a per capita startups, patents, many other measures of the kind of density of insight and relevance and ability to take science and tech through to the world. There's $23 billion businesses here. Proud my business has helped found 3 of those, but there's loads more as well. And if you get a random 1,000 people from off the streets around here, you'll find they have 2.5 patents or more between them. The background image is the science park where I work, the first in Britain science park, but where we're gathered here and in many other places, there are so many campuses and so many parts now to this hub. It's so much better connected. So I know we're not focusing on how special Cambridge is, but I wanted to do a little bit on kind of how we got here. In my lifetime, in our lifetimes on average, I think we've seen the pendulum of public opinion, need around science and technology swing to and fro. So when I grew up in the 80s, we were at a hot spot. It was cool. It was something that promised to fix the future. It was exciting, possibly only second to the time of the moon landings in terms of excitement. I would tune into Tomorrow's World on the BBC every week to get my dose, as millions of others did, of the new gadgets, of the new world that was coming. And then something went wrong. The news of the hole in the ozone layer spread, and that was caused by CFCs, which were in some way caused by scientists. We found carcinogens in an increasing number of products and processes. We created violations of the natural order, or so it seemed, to the lay community in GM crops and cloning, and then we learned we were causing ecological problems, right the way up to the big concerns over climate. And probably around the noughties, it was not the coolest thing to admit you were at a dinner party was a scientist or an engineer. I now firmly believe we're all back in fashion today. The world has woken up to the fact there are some societal or even planetary scale challenges. The pandemics, food, water, disease, aging population, and these need big solutions. So I think we've got more than permission to proceed as technology leaders. We actually have an obligation to do our part in bringing that better world together. We're going to hear in some sessions over the coming days around individual technologies. We'll drill into quantum or artificial intelligence. Maybe next year we'll have a focus around biotech and synthetic biology. But if we look at the previous generation, I call it digital dominance. I mean, it's still very much with us. One thing's for sure, nothing succeeded by itself. The first silicon chips were drawn with a pen and transparency because there were no computers to do them on. These days, you would never design a silicon chip without using CAD software running on a silicon chip. So that virtuous circle caused an acceleration in what was possible way quicker than anyone anticipated. So as we look to fix these problems that are around actually how crops grow and water and climate and disease work, we need new exciting physical technologies, stuff from science, but we need to combine those in complex ways we're only just beginning to understand. I've got some notes throughout this, things we might want to talk about over the coming days. And I think one particular challenge is that deep tech is never going to look like an easy bet. It's a long-term investment. It may be a high return, but it has uncertainty and it has a long time scale to it. So we've got to find ways of breaking those world challenges down into pieces, so sharing out the risk, sharing out the rewards as we proceed with them. That means whether we're investors, whether we're teams doing this, we have got to be better at linking what we're doing today to value in the future. Business return, societal impact, we need to be able to communicate clearly. This image here is a rendering of a protein, an enzyme capable of breaking down plastics. Well, we want to work with that kind of thing and make it work better. But we've got to do better to the outside world than say, we are predicting protein folding using AI, or we are actually simulating how the molecule works on quantum computers. That is all true, that is all necessary, but we've somehow got to outline the end goal, the benefits. Think about how we do that. But we don't need to be defeatist. We can occasionally pull things from the distant future forward. If you haven't seen it, in 2018, Imperial College published a fascinating chart of 100 disruptive technologies. As you work sort of further out to the reaches of the chart, it goes up in the time scales when they think the technology was going to mature and in the disruptive impact. And sandwiched here between male pregnancy and artificial wombs and AI board members and politicians, and that, your story, Ollie, really scares me there because you've only got to think what ChatGPT might do to politics. But in that same zone of it ain't going to happen for 20 years, you find DNA data storage. It was supposed to be far out. Well, there was a startup in the US who had an idea of how they might store data in DNA, incredibly important for archiving and other things. And they looked around the world for a partner to build the first machines, which needed to work fluently with engineering and software and all those principles, but it actually had to do core biology at the same time. And they settled on working with this Cambridge hub, with my business, to build the first machine capable of storing data in DNA. We put all of English language Wikipedia in a tiny vial of fluid in an afternoon, and that's more than anyone had ever stored in DNA put together in that point. So you can't yet tick an option in your cloud service to say, archive my data to DNA, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen 15 years ahead of when it was supposed to. And if you're curious and look this up, this table was quietly edited the following year and something else was put in over the top. So you need an original copy of it. And I think that's really exciting that it's possible to pick at some of these new things and bring them forward. We only have to look, though, at the way air travel, a technical innovation, increased the death toll early in COVID, to see the unintended consequences of deploying of technology. Of course, the flip side, you might say, is that vaccines were developed much more quickly than was reasonable. But we have to be bold, ambitious, we have to reach the future, and we have to do it carefully. We need ethical frameworks. An example in the background here, work my business did around counting cells in TB management under a microscope in some of the poorest countries in the world. Well, that's a great thing to do. It is appalling work to stare at a microscope all day counting cells and unreliable. Well, using a bit of edge AI on cheap phones, we were able to make that a bit better. But we had to check carefully that we were not about to just reduce local employment rather than just reduce human suffering. I hope we'll hear all the way through about the need for diversity in teams. There's so many reasons that's important. Well, this is one very important reason. We need to be able to cross-reference, cross-check. We need people from different backgrounds, walks of life to be able to look at a potential solution and shoot it down if at all possible. So I'm going to wrap up around this point. I've gently started to make the case, maybe give some thinking points around. I think we have an obligation to apply science and technology systematically, but with ambition to some world problems. We're going to have to combine together technologies that we don't understand yet, that we are treating as isolated topics to have the right kind of impact. It's going to be a long-term game. There's going to be some investment losses along the way, but that's all the more reason to bring together ever bigger communities of insights and ability. And if we do reach forward aggressively into the future and do things early, we'd better do it with a kind of ethical stance or framework behind us. So I thought I'd end by sharing what I've asked of my team, which is seize the opportunities in front of us. This is not the biggest hub in the world. We don't locally in the UK have access perhaps to the unicorn level of funding that occasionally happens in the US. We don't even have the sheer weight of resource to bring to bear on solving challenges that increasingly parts of Asia and even Latin America now do. But we do have a spirit of curiosity, innovation and entrepreneurship. That is what has got us to this point now, and that is what is going to serve us well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Monty.